Hello everyone again. I'm Surya Golagani, Director Marketing here at Datagaps, and thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick housekeeping comments. First, we have muted all mics to avoid unintended distractions. Next, the chat room is open so that you can interact with us through the chat. And finally, at the end of this session, we will open it up for Q&A. Today, in this webinar, we will understand how you can leverage Datagaps DataOps Suite to automate your Tableau testing and elevate trust in your Tableau reports for better decision making. On the panel today, we have David Small, VP of Sales Marketing at Datagaps, and Shubhanshu Dikshit, our Product Manager at Datagaps. And here is our agenda for today. So we'll have a quick overview of Datagaps and DataOps Suite. Next, we will dwell into advanced Tableau testing automation methods that set standard for data excellence. Next, we will talk about how to significantly enhance the efficiency and reliability of your testing process to ensure high quality data analytics and reports. Then we move into its demo with a couple of real world use cases to demonstrate report validations and data observability, followed by a Q&A session. And now I hand this over to Dave. Dave, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Celia, and thank you all for attending. We do these events, we enjoy doing the events, and hopefully you get a lot out of them. Put a lot of effort into these things. So look forward to any comments and questions at the end of the session. So to get started with Datagaps, thought it might be important to really just sort of talk about, the issues that we're trying to address and the problems that these issues are causing in the industry. According to Gartner, poor data quality costs companies in all industries an average of 12.9 million a year, every year. And that manifests itself in a lot of different ways, from the quality of the data coming in, the data itself getting anomalies introduced as it moves through pipelines. We'll be talking mostly about the consumption in Tableau and what could potentially happen to cause some of the issues there as well. Gartner also says that 70 to 80% of the BI projects result in failure. If you think about the amount of money people spend in data warehouse projects, and to have that kind of failure, then that is a lot of sunk cost and a lot of benefit that could have been applied someplace else. Now, I searched the internet. There are a lot of different, and this is just a conglomeration of different reasons why BI projects fail. Certainly, poor understanding of the BI project, or one of the big ones I see all the time is the lack of executive buy-in. So instead of it being a pet project for some department, you really need to have that executive buy-in. So that project is an important thing for the organization and the executives. Incomplete requirements, use of the wrong BI tool, potentially using a BI tool that's really meant for self-service, but it's being developed by the IT organization. The one thing that is always in common in anytime you search for these lists to see what happens in the BI development and the deployments is that there is poor data integrity, and that is always in the list. So you don't start a BI project until you have a process in place to ensure that data integrity. So that's number one or two always in any kind of these lists. So talking about the quality, found this quote out on the internet, and I sort of liked it from the point of view that it's really sort of hits home. Investing in cutting edge business intelligence solutions only to fuel it with poor data quality is like building a skyscraper in the sand. The project is doomed from the beginning. You don't have the right foundation. You're bringing in incorrect data. And this individual says that the data quality needs to be a priority early in the project, if not before it even starts. So many recommendations that we would make would be to have your data quality processes and thinking start with the project and develop some of these things as you develop your data warehouse and your business intelligence applications. So, thought I'd talk about the week in the life of a data engineer or QA person and what happens. This is a typical pipeline that most organizations see where data is being ingested. They have a landing zone and a curated zone, ultimately gets to a warehouse and then finally gets consumed in the dashboards in your data analytics platform. But as this happens, if people are doing manual testing or not doing enough testing, there's certain questions that come about, and one of them is, did the manual test of the data quality measures find anything? Well, yes or no, and maybe you go back through and correct things at that point. But maybe you're also not doing 100% validation. Another one is, did the changes in the metadata make it into the system? Okay, that's great. That happened. That worked. Did the ETL processes run correctly? If you're doing that manually and checking that manually, oftentimes you miss some things in the ETL process where there's a hiccup there. Then did all the data loads to the data warehouse happen? And then then at Friday at 3 o'clock, you're like, hey, boss, everything looks good. We're good to go for your reports for the board on Monday. And the boss comes back at 4 on Friday and says, hey, what happened to our revenue report? It's inaccurate, it's incomplete, and we've got problems for our Monday meeting. So that is, in a nutshell, the problem we're trying to solve. Is as data comes in, we help validate it. As it moves through processes, we help make sure that it's being transformed, and we make sure that it's being enriched and that there's not any anomalies. We can check 100% of the data coming into the enterprise. It moves into the warehouse. We validate that it's been moved correctly. And then as it gets consumed in your dashboards and reports, we validate that through regression testing and a variety of things along those lines. We do that through a suite of technology. So our whole goal is to observe and validate the data pipeline from the point of ingestion all the way through to consumption. And we do that with three technologies and then a fourth that complements some. So DataOps Suite is an Apache Spark-based implementation. It's web browser-based, and it has components such as ETL Validator, BI Validator, data quality monitoring, and then creating synthetic test data through test data generation. In today's discussions, we'll be talking mostly about BI Validator. So typical use cases, as data comes into the enterprise for the production use case, they use our technology to validate the data has come in, it's properly formed, it's moved through the ETL processes, and then gets consumed in the analytics platform. But for development environments, the same type of thing happens, but now we're checking code. We're validating that, hey, what you're creating is what you expect and is accurate based upon what the business needs and requirements are. So in today's discussion, we'll be talking about BI Validator and how does that help ensure that you're making trusted decisions or decisions based upon trusted data. That'd be a big part of what we're doing today and talking about. So data analytics, what could go wrong? Here's a simple dashboard. It's a customer analysis dashboard, has a heat map, has some bubble charts, metrics, also has filters and sliders and a wide variety of things. And the data could be coming from a variety of sources. And there are times those variety of sources are giving you cause for having issues in your data pipeline, which cause the problems in your analytics platform. So what we look at is, and the cause of this is the sheer number of dashboards that you might have. The data elements that you might have in all of the data feeds and such. The reports really should be verified. Has metadata changed? A simple metadata change in the very front end can cause problems in the back end, along with things like security models changing, the underlying database, or issues in your ETL process. And these are all the types of things that we're helping organizations avoid. because these can result in increased cost of ownership, but more importantly, really a loss of trust in the enterprise data and the reporting capabilities. So winding down, I'd like to talk about a number of really good examples of where people have used our technology and have had great success. One is a pharma organization that has over 50,000 users and 10,000 workbooks. And what they were experiencing is every time they would upgrade Tableau, they would have to go through months and months of testing of that new version to make sure that their 50,000 users weren't affected. They used us for regression testing and performance testing. The overall results was they automated their top 5,000 reports, and they reduced the testing from months to just days. So they had a tremendous return on investment. So I'd like to turn this over to Shibanshu for the demo. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dave. All right, so let's get started with the technical aspect of the demo. There are a few specifics that we want to get into, and there are a bunch of use cases that we want to cover as well. Rest assured, we can get into a specific detail on a later time. What we want to ensure is that we cover the basics of the application as a whole. In this demo, I want to start with the architecture and not getting too much into it without a slide, just illustrate where exactly the data sources lie and how exactly the application resides within your infrastructure and works with it. After that, I want to take a quick look at the sources that the application follows compatibility with. Then we will jump into the use cases and we'll end with some reporting and some plugins. Now we'll get started with the brief discussion on the architecture as a whole. Now, I have a slide present here, but for the sake of time, we'll skip that. And the main gist that I want to cover is that the application can be installed directly onto you or your client's infrastructure. The main reason for this is quite straightforward. We understand that data sets and BI reports and all the corresponding KPIs and metrics associated with them are highly sensitive and thus are kept in secure spaces. This could be behind firewalls, this could be in specific accounts, and even in on-prem situations, on-prem locations with a lot of our existing client base. So we understand that for a data quality validation system, be it observability, BI validation, and ETL validation as a whole, we can't rely on the clients to get the approvals from their compliance team to push their data sets outside their system. So what we do to solve this entire problem is to ensure that the application is agnostic enough that it can be installed directly onto an on-prem system as well as a cloud system, be it AWS, Azure, or even a Google Cloud platform. That's the basics of the architecture that I want to cover here. And I just want to say it out loud that yes, with regards to compliance, the application has been passing with flying colors on every particular avenue. And we are more than happy to have a discussion with your existing compliance team about the architecture and further details. The final point with regards to the architecture is that the application does have a good amount of ISO certifications, and we're more than happy to have a discussion on the certification side and the security side as well. With that out of the way, let's get right into the actual use cases of our application, starting with the different types of connectivity that the application provides. Let the screen rest on this particular menu for a while, as this gives you a broad overview on how many different types and variety of connections the application supports right from the get-go. These includes everything from JDBC connections, which are your usual players of SQL Server, Snowflake. It could also be around the lines of BigQuery, Synapse, Redshift, Hive, and so on, as well as file systems. Let me quickly get into file systems, and we can have a discussion here as well. So if you're looking at files, it can be anything from your run-of-the-mill CSV file to Parquet files, and also maybe some hierarchical files in the mix as well. This could be JSON, XML, and even COBOL and Avro files as well. And this could be placed in any specific location as well. This includes your typical on-prem system. It could be a shared folder, a SharePoint folder, or it could be in more likely, in a cloud deployment use cases, an ADLS system or an S3 bucket. The application has connectivity with all of these. If there's something that is a mess that you don't see within this particular use suite of connections, we do have a CData connector for those specific CRM connectors if you're up for it. However, we also provide a generic connection as well as an API connection to connect to any specific data set. The goal of our application is to be comprehensive, and we ensure that one way or the other, we can connect to a specific data set. I'll open up just one connection to illustrate how this connectivity works. It's quite straightforward. At the end of the day, for defining a connection, all you need are the credentials or a credential file and the connection URL. That's what you see for our SQL Server connection here. If we have a password vault, this is an internal password vault that the product comes with by default. But if you have an existing credential management service, the application can connect with that as well. Now we switch to the main focus of today, which is Tableau validation. Now for Tableau validation, we need to ensure that we can connect to Tableau, and that is pretty straightforward. All we need are the credentials and we're good to go. We have multiple types of authentications. We'll not get into too much detail around them, but it basically ensures that if you want to just test the product using user credentials, you can do that. Alternatively, what we recommend is a direct trust authentication, where you tell the Tableau system as a whole that there's an application called Datagaps that you trust, and the application is going to provide you with secret keys that you place here, and the connection is automated. And so thus, when you are creating these test cases that you want to automate, that you want to run at 5 in the morning, as soon as the data arrives within your pipeline before you get into the office, you can do that as well in an automated fashion. Now that we have wrapped things up from a source perspective, let's get into the actual use cases itself. And we're going to start with the primary use case, which is the default for a lot of our clients, which is the following. They have a Tableau report, and this particular Tableau report has multiple KPIs. The main question here is, how do I validate this set of KPIs and numbers that I see within my application? So we'll wait for a second for this Tableau report to load. And while it happens, I'll just give a brief on how exactly the application works in this particular sense. So before this particular loading screen, you must have noticed that the application had a Tableau icon pop up as well. The main reason for that is that we are connecting directly to Tableau. Thus, if you're going to pull any specific data sets from Tableau, those will be loaded in here as well. This is a live Tableau report. It has all the filters and other aspects, and this is interactable as well. But the main gist here is that I have all these different visuals and other KPIs present here. How do I ensure that the numbers seen in this particular data set are valid? Well, the application can capture these data sets quite directly using the worksheet itself. And this is after the application of filters and other aspects as well. That's the first key factor, that we can pull data sets out of Tableau directly. And these data sets are the data sets that Tableau has generated after consideration of the filters, slicers, and other row-level security aspects which are specific to an account. That's the first part of our problem statement, that we need to validate these data sets. So we need to pull them out of the system. And in this case, we have pulled them out as specific data sets. The other part of my statement is that, yes, now that I've pulled out these numbers from my Tableau report, well, how do I validate them? There are multiple dimensions here. And the dimension we want to illustrate here is validation against the data itself. You can always say that your numbers that you see in the report are valid because you have validated them against the numbers seen in your raw data set itself. For the sake of this example, my raw data in this case is an Excel file. But as you see with the component systems here, the application is highly customizable, and we don't lock you to a specific template. If you want to define your own test case, you can do that as well. This includes connecting to any of the sources we discussed earlier, applying SQL processing, PySpark, Python, Java, Spark, and Scala as well, applying these set of processors, and then correspondingly validating the use cases and saving the results either as a file or as a view within your system. This is leaving apart the BI analytics specialty tools that the tool offers. The main gist here is that the test case that we create is not limited to a set template, and so we give the end users a lot of flexibility in this case. Here, the Excel file that we have picked up is loaded in. You see the first few rows, and then the only step left here is an aggregation. Main reason we need to aggregate is that a data set that we picked up from Tableau is an aggregated data set, and this is what we pick up here as well. We have a query builder and an OpenAI assistant to help you with the aggregation as well. Finally, data compare comes into picture, and here what you see is that, yes, there is a match and there's a bunch of mismatched records. Particularly critical second class and high first class are the combinations for which we see a mismatch which is higher than a threshold. So there's a lot of things happening here. We've got wind of the exact mismatches that we see within our Tableau report, and we've compared them directly against the data set to see how much variance is against the data, the raw data itself, and the Tableau report. In this particular data comparison, a lot of things are happening as well in the background. The mapping of the corresponding data sets is done automatically. The data type conversions are also done automatically. And most of all, the application keeps track of not just mismatches, but also duplicates and records present only in one system and not the other. Well, that's the first part of the problem statement, that yes, we wanted to ensure that our reports are valid and the KPIs seen here are valid, but we found out, well, they are not valid actually. So what now? We've defined our test case. Well, what do we want to do next? Well, that's where the application goes one step ahead as well. Here we see that there's a plugin that can raise a Jira ticket automatically based on the exact use case. So here the business use case is that I've defined this test case to run, scheduled it to run every day. But in case there's a failure, say my application runs every 4 hours or 8 hours because I am working with a high frequency data set. In that case, I want it to run anytime there's a difference found within my application. And so this particular plugin raises a Jira ticket the moment there's a difference found between my visual and my raw data. Correspondingly, I can change this to be a Teams notification. Alternatively, I can also change this to be a ServiceNow incident creation. This particular set of plugins, this is something that is customizable, and you can create your very own plugins as well using the inbuilt Python code editor and the plugin generator. And we'll discuss that in the end if we have some time. The main gist here is that with regards to integrations, the application has a great amount of integration support, as you see with this particular example. Just to finish up the first part of this particular example, alternatively, if I have found mismatches within my records, if I found errors within my reports, and I want to make sure I save these corresponding errors, while the application is going to keep track of all the history of test cases that have been run with a good reporting system of what were the mismatch records and other aspects. If I'm having, say, more than 2, in this case, we have just 2 records just to illustrate the point. But if I had, say, 2,000 mismatches because my Tableau report had a table within it, and I was trying to validate that table as well. In that specific case, while we can display, about 1,000 rows in here, the better thing to do in this case is, of course, save this set of mismatched records in another system. And that's what we're doing. We are saving the incorrect data as a specific file. I can choose to save it as a table, and then I can choose to reconcile it further, because for the application, this is just a data set. I can choose to, of course, work with the mismatched records and put them to reconciliation logic as well. But in this example, we are simplifying things, and this is the main use case here. So just as a recap, we picked up data sets from Tableau. We picked up data sets from our raw data. Here it's an Excel file. We have created the aggregate from our Excel data, and then we have compared our Tableau report and the aggregate created from our Excel. And then we have found issues, and we have notified teams about the issues, as well as saved the incorrect data in a specific location. So now to finish up this entire example, properly. So finish up this particular example, I'll go to a different report comparison just to illustrate what we mean. And in here, we see that we are working with a database. Here, instead of an Excel file, we have a SQL server. Once again, this is agnostic, and you can have anything specific here. But the use case I want to really get into and spend the specifics about is that in the previous use case, I did not apply any filters to my Tableau report. Now everyone knows that when you're going to look at a Tableau report, as an admin, you might have a global look at it. As a super admin, you might have access to all the KPIs. But from an end user perspective, an end user is going to look at specific filters, combinations, and then they're going to look at those metrics. And it can be that if there is a huge error in a very small amount of data specific to just a few filters, that huge error will be ironed out into the tolerances that we have described earlier. Thus, it's paramount for us to ensure that the reports are being validated at a granular level. To this degree, what we provide is a parameterization capabilities. As you see here, we have parameterized our start date and end date, and the report that we are working with, the report in question, has the specifics filter right here. Again, we're going to go with this very easy example for illustration purposes, but all the set of filters that we have, this could be categorical, this could be in other spaces of, say, quantitative as well, can be parameterized. So here, I can define them as a parameter right here by copying and pasting the dates. So in this case, I have now parameterized my ranges of filters. And correspondingly, I can do the same for my aggregate, because as you imagine, it's very important to do the same thing in my aggregate as well. And that's what we see here. Now that I've done this, let's take a step back. What are we doing? We're ensuring that the data we pick up from from our Tableau report is a filtered data set. So it's after the application of, say, n number of filters, 10 or 20 filters as well. And I need to make sure when I'm creating my aggregate, I'm applying the same filters to the aggregate condition. Here we have done that in the various statement. Now we are validating the report. Here we see that for an overall level, the reports do match. That's fine. But this is a part of an example puzzle, and the entire example shows that in other use cases, if I go into the run history, this test case has repeatedly failed, And the reason it has failed is because for many specific use cases, these parameters were not found. The parameters, for the specific parameters, this test case failed. I'll showcase that in the reporting section of this demo. Now, with that particular set out of the way, I want to take a step back further and look at it from a zoomed out perspective on where exactly this particular tool fits into your system. And the go-to example for me in this case would be something along the lines of what a lot of our clients are starting to use these days, especially past 1-2 years. It's the medallion architecture. So medallion architecture states that you have an initial your data sets coming in from vendors, then you have a few sets of layers, namely bronze, silver, and gold. And then your golden layer is what you use for your BI tools. Here, we have defined this pipeline and highly simplified it for the sake of illustration from top to bottom. Our landing layer is our SQL server. Our Salesforce is what we use for our production data. And our Tableau report, once again, plays the role of the BI tool. Now, as you see here, when we are trying to validate our data through its journey within our pipeline, we can apply this validation on multiple locations. Here, the SQL Server and Salesforce data sets are being compared against each other, and correspondingly, the Salesforce data being aggregated, and then it's being compared against the Tableau report. And in here, we see that what are the type of problems that we find here. While there are no mismatches between my landing layer, which is my SQL Server, and my production data, I see there are records present only in my landing layer, which have not made it through into the production layer. And that is cause for concern for me. And in the same way, when I'm validating my visual now at a level where I am validating the visual against the golden layer, which is Salesforce here, I see this is a complete mismatch. The data sets don't match at all. So in this particular way, considering just a single dimensional table is what we are trying to validate in this, the scope of the product is revealed. That we can ensure that through your entire pipeline, you can keep track of multiple dimensions, facts, and KPIs as they travel through your pipeline. So this is one of the zoomed out views on how the product is being used by a lot of our clients. They use it to ensure that if they want to keep track of a proper KPI, they need to ensure that they're keeping the track of its journey throughout their system. Of course, since this is customizable to a great degree, I can have an Excel file here as well. I can have an API and a lot more. One thing that I'm going to skip over in this particular demo is, of course, our rule aspect associations. So what I mean by that is that the application does have a data rule system here, and this can be used for applying rules which are as simple as, let's just pick this boy up, rule as simple as duplicacy rule, applying some null checks, applying business specific rules like ensuring that a particular metric is within a certain range. You can also ensure that a pattern you see is present. One common need that we see is that the clients, a lot of our clients want to ensure that the metrics the way these metrics are represented in the reports, well, they want to ensure that there are only 2 decimal values. They want to ensure that they're only 6 digits long. If they're more than 6 digits long, they want this particular aggregate to be further broken down using K's in their symbols and a lot more. So all these type of rules that they would like to deploy, both data related as well as visual related, can be deployed using data quality rules present right there. Now let's move on to another aspect of the validation. And this is where, so far we're discussing a lot of data, a lot of other aspects, but now let's get into the actual meat of BI validation, which is, hey, at the end of the day, there are people who are looking at these reports. And from an aesthetic perspective and from a visual perspective, reports should match. So here we bring in the upgrade and regression test case. I'll expand this use case as we see. And now it's much more apparent what we are trying to do here. We have 2 reports, and the business use case here could be plethora. It could be along the lines that I have a report migration project. I'm transferring my BI from on-prem to cloud, and I want to ensure that my reports are valid. It will also be between environments. Report A is from my QA system, and report B is from my production. I want to ensure that these remain in sync. And there's a lot more specific that we can get into when we're trying to compare reports against each other. But the main aspect is the product can do a pixel-to-pixel comparison as well as a textual comparison and highlight wherever there are differences found within the report. So here we see that the exact naming of our title is slightly incorrect. Sales for ship mode, sales per ship mode, and there's a complete set of filters which is missing. But as I said earlier, the application can also do a pixel-to-pixel comparison. And we see that right here. And if I zoom in, it's also highlighting something very specific, which is that this particular filter of ship mode has actually been shifted by a few pixels down. The application has a great amount of capability with regards to the actual visuals and catalogs as well. But this helps illustrate the point that if you want to validate your reports one against the other, you can easily do that within the application, as deploying this is as simple as defining which 2 reports you want to work with, and you're good to go. And the definition can be defined right here itself, and you can get a good access to the exact workspaces and views that you currently have access to. And the second part of this entire use case is, well, comparing two distinct reports is fine, but the problem statement that I have, and a lot of BI folks have this, is that, well, I'm on Monday Scrum call. I understand that, well, there's going to be a few changes coming in. There's going to be changes to a transformation logic, and there are a lot of people who are going to come and look at the reports and other aspects. Now, this is my report, and I want to ensure, and I know this for a fact, that this particular report is not going to be altered, even after all the transformations. I know there's also an upgrade coming in, but this particular report should remain the same. This should remain consistent. And so what I do is I apply something called a regression test, where I pick up only one report. Here you see that we have only a single connection, and I benchmark this report. Benchmarking here implies that this is my source of truth. I want this version of the report to remain consistent. And if there's any change in this particular version, call it out immediately. And in this case, we have called out a specific difference as someone has gone in and updated the filters of this particular system. And if I zoom in, you'll also see that, of course, the color legends have been altered drastically, but the visual elements have also been altered and they have been moved around. In this particular fashion, we can ensure that a particular report is being compared against itself or other reports, and any differences are being called out. In the upcoming release, you can also choose at a region-specific level that if you want to, you can apply this validation for a specific subsection of a report as well. And once again, you don't have to worry if you don't have a PDF version of the report. The application handles all that in its backend as well. Once again, everything is automated to a great degree. Our final use case for this particular demo is with regards to observability. And this is something that has been catching on a lot of attention for a lot of our clients and potential demo calls as well, where this is the problem statement that we are ending up with. So this is my particular Tableau report. I can actually get into the specifics, but the main gist here is that I have two specific visuals. And now while I can apply rules for my validation, I can apply comparisons for my validation, where I can compare my KPIs against the raw data. I can compare my report against another report for validation. From a production monitoring perspective, it's not really applicable for a lot of my metrics. Well, of course, you can apply data compare to your critical metrics, but if you have thousands of metrics, you can't go in and apply validation from a data compare perspective on each and every one of them. In that specific use case, you need to play it smart, and in this case, use a bit of AI and machine learning. Here's where we use some profiling into the mix. So let's go. The upper one is a bar graph, the lower one is a line graph. And what I have done is I've put the bar graph into a profile node. The profile node is going to take care of a lot of things for us, and it's a one-time setup for the end user. It's going to take care of the volumes. It's going to take care of the duplicacies, what's the percentage of duplicacies, what the percentage of distinct records, what is the distribution of these records, what are the patterns seen in the records, everything with regards to aggregates, min, max, length, the decimal counts, and everything, and the kitchen sink actually, that the application takes care of with the aggregates. And at any point, if there is a change, if there is a shift, the application can catch that. As here we see, based on the previous few runs, well, something is up with sales. If I click on sales, it's going to show me, well, everything else seems good. Mean is what's causing this particular shift. And this graph reveals the entire story in a nutshell. Our past few runs revealed that this particular metric in this particular bar graph, well, was only about, say, 150K to 200K or 250K-ish. That was the mean value that we were expecting. But suddenly it has been shot to 700K. Now, 700K is a huge spike. And so it's probably a good cause that, hey, someone has to go back and check the reports. Someone has definitely altered something specific. The same type of validation can be done across the other aggregates that we saw. And this is more likely to find out any kind of realistic issues within your application. So if you're looking at, say, landing data sets or other aspects, you expect a certain distinct set of records that you expect. So you expect that, well, most of my records are not duplicates, but I expect about 60% distinct records. You don't even have to calculate that. The application will keep track of that, and any shift is being captured. The frequency analysis is just the distribution of records, and pattern analysis is the string pattern. Very helpful when you're working with license plates or GUI IDs, where you're expecting a set pattern, like take, for example, the license plate itself. 3 numbers followed by a hyphen, followed by 3 numbers, and then something more. The application will keep track of that specifically. That's part A of our report observability, that, okay, we're keeping track of all this, but if you look down, we have something that's a bit more challenging. This is the number of orders that we see, and orders, like a lot of metrics, is not exactly uniform. There's going to be irregularities, there's going to be seasonalities, and there's going to be multiple factors that affect the exact volume of orders seen. Luckily, we have done one thing already for the product, which is bifurcating them. So here, a BI analyst understands that regular air, express air, and delivery truck, these ship modes affect the exact number of orders seen. So we bifurcate them already. But still, as you see, it's very irregular line chart that we have to find out. And well, we need to know if the metrics that we see here, are these valid? Well, that's where machine learning code comes into picture. And we ensure that from an end user perspective, you get complete access to it. You know your data better, so you get to choose a lot of things here. You get to choose the exact categorization, the measures, how you want to aggregate them, and the cadence alongside which you want to train this. You got a lot of control on the prediction method as well, as we see here. But most importantly, skipping to the results, the application finds out the anomalies, and this time for specific categories. Note that delivery truck has passed, its regular air which has failed. And once again, the graph reveals the story much better than I can say. And as you see, the teal color is the bluish green color is what we are tracking. That's the upper and lower bounds of the application and what it expects the data set to work with. And as we move towards the right, the application has understood the peaks and valleys of this particular system, the seasonality of this particular metric. And if there's an unseasonal peak that we have captured right here, it's going to call it out. This is a very powerful tool to ensure that the reports that you're working with are valid. One of the primary use cases that we see with a lot of our clients is that, well, we are BI folks, right? We don't have access to the raw data. Well, how can I apply such validation rules? So this is one of the key benefits of our using BI Validator, which is it does not lock you in behind a specific template of validation. It gives you a lot of tools, and based on your specific needs and use cases, you can choose and apply the tool you would like to apply. Now that we have covered up this entire set of use cases here, let's get into the actual system of, well, I'm keeping track of all this, but hey, I want a way to run all of these things together. I want to see the reporting. Well, I did see a bit of integration, but I want to wrap that up as well. So that's where reporting and pipeline comes into picture. Here in pipeline, you see that we can combine the test cases in the exact way we want. You can try to run them all together. You can run them in parallel. There's conditional clause and a lot more at mix here. And the other thing with regards to CI integrations that I want to discuss is, of course, CI/CD and DevOps integration. While we do have a scheduler present in the application, you can trigger this pipeline using your existing CI/CD tools as well. It can be Azure DevOps, it could be GitHub Actions, it could be Jenkins, and it could be any specific tool. The reason we say that with this confidence is that the application has a great number of externalized APIs for a lot of its actions. So you can even create test cases with using these APIs, but of course, a lot of the common use cases is with regards to changing parameters and triggering pipelines. Harkening back to our previous use case of iterative test cases, here we see that this particular test case was repeated for each and every set of parameter combination. And if I go into the run history, I can see that this particular test case was repeated for different configurations. And if I get into a bit more specifics here, so this is what I mean. As you see, this is the previous run. And I can actually go and look, okay, what happened in this specific run? Well, there was no data available. If I go into specific runs here, I can keep track of the different parameters that were used. So here we see 2012 was the parameter that was used. And if I skip over to a different one, we're at 2011. So when we ran this validations, we ran the validation for each and every combination of parameters. Here we are using just 2, but once again, we can use as many times as we would like. Just a keynote, these parameters are the data flow parameters. We understand that Tableau itself has one notation of parameter as well, but these are data flow parameters. Furthermore, as you see, we have reporting and other aspects present here, but I'll use this time to go into runs, recent runs specifically, and show that yes, the application does keep track of everything that you're doing within the application. So any kind of specific run, you can actually get into specifics and see, okay, for my Tableau folder, let's see what the runs look like, and everything has a downloadable report as well as a viewable report. I'm going to download the corresponding report and let's open it real quick. And here we see that this particular report is automatically generated. This is generated for each and every run. Here we see that we don't have a lot of specifics of KPI metrics or any kind of data here. That's by design. This is an exportable PDF. We can't choose to have raw records or any kind of BI related or even normal records or report information plastered here. This just gives you a brief overview of what the exact run looked like. But of course, if you want to have the exact use cases present, we have a custom reporting module that helps you create your own data quality monitoring pipeline as well. So here we see that, yes, based on the exact systems, what was the Salesforce looking like at that particular time? This is our landing layer, if you remember. We also have a Tableau system here. So here I can see what that corresponding Tableau report looked like back when I actually picked up the data set. So the application is keeping track of all this through multiple runs, also the parameters that we saw. And finally, if there was a difference, well, what was the exact difference? Well, the exact difference was on this particular line. The add widgets button here just illustrates the point further that you can add your specific widgets and customize this report to a great degree. You can also choose to add data widgets and a lot of component summaries as well. You can mix and match with your use case. But if you want to say define an entire pipeline and you want to create your own custom report, that is also applicable within the application. We give you a good amount of proprietary starting tools for that, where you can define page 1 is going to be about the critical KPIs, page 2 and 3 is going to have the summaries of the other validation use cases. As you see, everything is customizable to a great degree. And with that, I'm almost done. The only thing I wanted to wrap up is, of course, the plugins, and we'll end with that. The reason I wanted to wrap up with plugins is that this is what you saw at the start, that, hey, if you want to say send a Teams notification, this is the code of the Teams notification system. But this is not what we saw in the actual system. The QA developer is only going to see the parameters. The same thing is true for anything ranging from, say, Jira tickets creation, where there's a good amount of code, but the end user is only going to see parameters, or anything from ServiceNow to providing DBT jobs to enriching data and everything in between. The main reason to showcase this and end on this is to illustrate that the product is really capable of picking up any existing scripts, and you will never have to actually wait for a product release to have a feature or an integration that you're working with. Any developer, and we are more than happy to help our clients with this as well, can come in, define a exact integration or exact plugin they want to run with, define it once, and the QA tester is only going to see parameters and maybe the data sets if they're working with that, and that's it. The integration is very smooth. With that, I'd like to take a pause at this particular webinar, and we'd like to open the floor for some more questions if there are any.
Yeah, thank you, Subhanshu. Yeah, we have one question from the audience. It says, can you clarify whether the application is reading values from the chart snapshots directly or using the underlying data from the dashboard on Tableau server?
It's of a latter. So in this particular case, I'll use an example to illustrate this further. Let's open up one of these use cases itself. So when we are opening this Tableau report here, we are not reading the data using OCR or anything specific like that. Tableau itself is going to generate the data sets using the worksheets present. And here, I'll just illustrate this with the example. We see that US market is about 2250. But if I change the filters and other aspects, since I'm changing this and Tableau is going to update it from their end as well, these data sets are going to be updated. Now we are no longer at 225, we are at 1719. So we're picking up the output of the Tableau engine, so to speak.
While we get more questions from the audience, can you talk about the scalability and performance, how this handles large data sets or complex visualizations?
Well, with regards to, let's start with the former once again. With regards to complex visualizations, for this particular use case, we've gone very simple. We've gone to illustrate just basic bar graphs and other aspects. But the application handles anything ranging from even hidden tooltips. So if you're working with, say, complex box charts, map data, and other aspects, since the Tableau server, the Tableau on its own, is going to have a worksheet or data associated with it, for us, it's as simple as picking up what exact worksheet or what exact visual data you want to run with. This includes a bit of customization as well. So if you're working with a few custom visuals, the application has a great amount of integration with that as well. So we can definitely work with any kind of complex report. As far as scale is concerned, well, I would like to tag one of our use cases. One of our clients actually use our application for upgrade testing of upwards of 25,000 reports. So that's a great number for us to have. And so the application is easily scalable as well. Depending on your use case, you can actually define how much resources you want to run this particular application on. So from a scalability perspective, the application has got you covered. We will never see a bottleneck from our end at that point. The other thing about scalability, I do want to put this out. If you're working with, say, really large data sets and you have really large metrics as well, the application has handled that. We have done all our stress tests from our end, and the comparison node that we saw, this data compare node, it can handle comparisons upwards of trillions of records as well. Since we work on a Spark engine, performance is not really a concern from our end here.
Great. So yeah, another user almost like he wants to understand whether it compares only data from reports or also the visuals. I think we did that, but yeah, please, Subhanshu.
Actually, the question is very good. Actually, so far we are comparing the visual data from this visual against the raw data itself. But no, you can compare with the data compare, it's data sets. So you can compare visual against another visual. You can compare data against data as well. And you can mix and match your specific needs. So the data compare actually is very versatile in that specific use case.
So how about security? Because we are handling with a lot of sensitive data. What kind of security and compliance that we can offer here?
There are two fronts to that. So once again, that's a good question. And there are two specific fronts to that. Firstly, with regards to the security and performance on Tableau, we do have specific tests which are coming, which we couldn't have time to showcase in this use case, but we have those test cases where we can do performance tests, stress testing on Tableau servers, and we can also perform security tests on the Tableau server itself, basically ensuring that your corresponding user models, permissions, and other aspects remain as is, and you can apply rules on top of them as well. That's security from a Tableau perspective, and that's just something I remembered from the top of my mind. But the application has a great amount of PII masking that's built into the product. So I'll use this customer data model just to illustrate what I mean here. So if I go into DIM customer here, of course, the DIM customer is going to have a lot of PII data sets, personal identify information. The application can understand that. And if I'm working with the data sets here, as you see in the sample data, I can choose to actually, let's go back to sample. I can choose to actually, censor them. So here we see full, null, address, name, birthday. These are all censored within my application. The only thing I see is the IDs, education, and other stuff, which is not PII data. So the application can work to this extent to ensure that you're masking data sets that the end user should not really see.
Thank you, Shubhanshu. So, Dave, do you want to share any of our current customer challenges that this has been addressing, which can help our audience to understand better?
Large number of customers find that the end-to-end, one product with the end-to-end validation from ingestion through consumption is a nice complement to have to validate the data that's coming in, the processes that they have, doing reconciliation back to their production applications at times. So there's a lot of utility in what we do, not just validating the BI reports. But, we also have customers that are producing reports that go outside of their organization to the public. And one such customer was out of Northeast University, and they were publishing reports. They found that every so often metrics or measures or something was wrong in the report, and it was always embarrassing when the public found those for you and pointed out that you've got an issue with the reports. So it's not just internal, but also external type reporting that needs to be validated. And so they came to us, and using our technology, using BI Validator and our ETL validator, they could validate 100% of the data and also all of the reports that were producing information outside of the university. So very good success story there. And so you can sort of pick and choose in terms of where you want to apply the validations and what processes you're having issues, and where in the pipeline do things begin to fall apart, and then you can solve those particular problems, and then maybe down the road as you get some of the more major issues resolved, then maybe you bring in BI Validator as an example to validate the data analytics platform. You may start with that. We have many customers that start with that and then move left, right? So the shift left mentality says that the earlier you find the problem, the easier it is and the less costly it is to fix. So it's really working with us in a collaborative mode, or your SIs. We have a number of partners that we use, and they do implementations for us as well, and just have some very good successes along those lines.
Thank you, Dave. Shubhanshu, another question from the audience. If the source is an Excel, then how can we apply transformations on that data and then compare it with the Tableau report?
Aspect there is that for the application, it doesn't really matter what your exact source is, because once this particular Excel file has been loaded, for the application, it's just a data source. It's just a data frame. This particular data frame, in this case, I've used SQL to aggregate this data set here. This is my orders. This was a sheet in my Excel sheet. And here I've used SQL to create the aggregate. Alternatively, in another use case, I've picked up, say, SQL Server. So here, the application is picking up SQL Server. I can pick up anything out of the exact, all the sources that we saw earlier. Once again, here the source is Global Superstore, and it's a table that I have within my metadata. And while I'm not doing the aggregation here, I'm doing the aggregation in my subsequent SQL step. I just bring account across ship mode and market. I hope this clarifies the things. The main aspect there is that for the end user, like at the end of the day, for the application, it doesn't matter if it's an API, if it's a flat file, if it's a JSON, or if it's a CSV file or a JDBC connection or Tableau or Power BI. These are data sets. Once they are in, all of those data sets can be treated equally. So you can apply any kind of SQL, Python, maybe some PySpark if you would like, some Scala on top of it, and the application just treats them as data sets itself. And the example here is this is an Excel file itself. So here I'm using a plugin because I'm working with a custom Excel file that I want to illustrate. And so as you see, I'm working with the basic Excel file itself. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think that's it, Shubhanshu. Thank you so much for that. Dave, you want to share any more details?
I think it's 4 minutes. We probably ought to wrap up. We want to thank everyone for attending. We're happy to have discovery calls with your organization. We're also happy to do custom demonstrations for your organization. We find that getting a custom demo is far better than just a generic demo. And during a discovery call, we really try to identify your pain points so we can address those during the demo. We have the process that a lot of people follow is they'll do a discovery call with us. They'll go through a demo process and then a short POC to prove out things, and we assist you every step of the way. So we're very collaborative in our approach. Many features that are in the product technology are a result of that collaboration with our customers. And so, we pride ourselves in support and putting out quality technology that solves, real world problems. So that's all I would have. And again, very much appreciated attending. Feel free to reach out to us. We're to entertain or see what issues you're faced with and see if our technology could be a solution. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dave. So we have links for free trial and a request demo that we have pasted in our chat. So if anyone is interested, please follow those links and send in your queries for that. And that says, and this comes to an end of this webinar. And thank you everyone for attending this today. See you all.